Day 4 of the Colorado removal trial, and we see a familiar face come in and testify. His name's Ken Buck, representative from Colorado. He's not going to be running for re-election, kind of had it with the Republican Party, he said. And we've been critical of Ken Buck here because he often sides what feels like Liz Cheney and that side of the Republican Party. But today, he came out and actually testified against the January 6th report and said that it was incomplete because it did not have a minority report that incorporated the Republican characterization of what happened. There was no counterbalance. There was no adversarial proceeding at all. And there were other witnesses who also testified on behalf of Trump's defense, and we'll get to all of them. We're going to start off with Amy Kremer, who was there as part of the Stop the Steal rally, and she testified to be the opposite of what was promoted by the petitioners, the people who are trying to keep Trump off the ballot. They say that he committed insurrection and that there was this right-wing extremist movement that was afoot. But this woman is now going to be explaining the nature of the crowd. It wasn't insurrectionists. These were good people.
Okay, so let's talk about the speech and the rally on January 6th. Were you there? And could you describe what it was like?
It was cold as hell, number one. It was the same type of atmosphere. You know, people had come from all over the country and they were concerned because they believed the election had been stolen. And I mean, same type of thing. You know, it was very, very uplifting, patriotic, and just full of love. I mean, happy people dancing. And just waiting to see their president.
And what kind of people were there? Were there, individuals, families? What kind of people were at this event?
I mean, I would say all, many types of people. We had elderly people there. We had blue-collar workers there. We had professionals there. There were donors there. It was, just a wide variety of people that were there.
And were you there for President Trump's speech?
Yes.
And can you describe the reaction of the crowd while he was speaking?
Well, these people love President Trump, and so they couldn't wait to see him. And they're cheering for him. And when he does these speeches, he plays off the crowd, and they're very reactive. And so it was the same type of thing. It's the same type of thing that you would see at a Trump rally.
And were you seeing any anger in the crowd?
No, not at all.
And as you were listening to President Trump, did you get the feeling that he was telling people to storm the Capitol?
Absolutely not.
And when he talked about fighting, what was your understanding of what he meant? Was he looking for physical fighting or was he looking for political?
No, he was metaphorically, political. We say fight like hell all the time, or, never back down, continue to fight. That is not physical fighting, that's metaphorical.
And so as President Trump was making his speech, I want to kind of redo this again, and making the statements about fighting, how was the crowd reacting to that?
I can't remember specifically, but I'm sure they cheering him on, agreeing with him and encouraging him, that sort of thing.
And then after President Trump finished speaking, what was the emotion of the crowd that you could see?
People were happy. They came there, the president was there. They came here to see their president. Many people have never been to Washington, D.C., so it was like a highlight of their life, and people were just happy that the whole event, it was a fantastic event. And lots of love.
Amy was coming in to explain that it's not insurrectionists, not violent mob of people who are trying to take over the Capitol. It's people who were there from all over the country, happy to be there in support of their president to protest a rigged election. And so she was joined by Representatives Paul Gosar's former chief of staff. His name is Thomas Van Flein, and he's going to explain that BLM and others were there and they were causing a ruckus. We'll get to his testimony right after a quick message from our friends. You probably saw this story about Chicago BLM supporting the attack on Israel with a very provocative X post. The title, Fury, as Black Lives Matter group posts image of paratrooper and says it stands with Palestine. A lot of people on the right were talking about this story, obviously, but on the left, total silence. When we look at the story over on Ground News, the sponsor of this video, we can see that there are currently more than 20 stories published about this, and over 90% of them were from the right. That makes sense. The right is indulging in the left's hypocrisy while the left is trying to ignore it. We can also see every article published on this topic in one place and compare each headline to see how the media is framing the story. What's nice about the Ground News app and their website is that it aggregates all the news sources from local and international sources on any given story, and it shows us who is saying what, and it even provides background information on the news sources themselves, like who owns them, and it gives us their factuality rating and their political leanings as well. But what I love most about Ground News is their blind spot feature, and maybe even more importantly, shows the stories that the right might be missing or even hiding themselves, stuff that we don't want to ignore and that we need to cover here. We have our opinions on this channel, of course, but we try to make sure that we know what the other side is doing, because that's how we make our arguments stronger. Ground News helps with exactly that, which is why I think what they're doing is more important than ever. So check it out for yourself. Go to ground.news/RGE. I really believe what they're doing is important, so check it out. The link is down in the description below. Thomas Van Flein. Now, he also was brought into the trial, the Colorado removal trial, day 4, and he is here explaining that other people were involved, like BLM, and they were there causing a lot of ruckus, but the FBI didn't raid all their properties and investigate them. Here's what he said, as again, we're trying to show the counter side to this, right? It was not a planned insurrection. Donald Trump was not trying to cause an insurrection at the Capitol. Here is the testimony from Thomas.
Can you describe the rally for us in terms of what the crowd looked like to you?
To me, the crowd looked like the typical middle-aged spring and fall that day, but people were in a good mood, people were singing, people were listening to music, they were broadcasting music with loudspeakers. It was pretty festive.
Thank you. And did you take any videos that day?
I did.
And did you take a video of Vernon Jones speaking?
I believe I did, yes.
Okay, could we play Exhibit 1082?
Yes, Your Honor. This is irrelevant for the standards of previously raised with respect to other speakers who this trial.
There's an objection.
Your Honor, we're not presenting the video to show Vernon Jones is speaking, where it actually shows the crowd as he's speaking, and the point is to see the crowd.
Same objection, Your Honor.
Well, I'm gonna let it, but, you know, I just maybe disagree. Eastman, Giuliani.
Like I said, this is not about showing the speaker.
I've overruled the objection.
Just a minute here, Mr. Van Flein. We're working through technology to get the...
They're playing this guy, and they're showing the crowd, right? He's speaking, everybody's laughing, having fun. Yeah, 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 America.
So, Mr. Van Flein, in that video, you panned around to the crowd. Was that a good was what the crowd looked like in that video a good representation of what you saw when you were there that day?
The crowd that I saw, that I walked through on my way there and walked through on the way out and was next to, was just that way. They were cheering, they were chanting USA, sometimes they broke out singing or praying, and it was, like I said, more like a festival than a rally. There was no anger.
And did you see any hate or anger among the crowd at all?
Not when I was there.
And you said you left the rally around 10:45, is that correct? Did I get that time right?
Yeah, give or take. That's pretty accurate.
And then you walked back to the Capitol, is that correct?
We actually got a ride back. We left. We walked to go to where the Department of Interior building was, and then got a ride to the Rayburn building, actually, not the Capitol.
And did you see anything notable on the way back to the Capitol?
On the way back, no. Things were still very calm. There were, isolated groups of people walking. Some going still in the direction of the rally to attend the rally, and some going the opposite direction. But on the streets at that moment, there was nothing.
And did you see anybody with BLM shirts at any time during that morning?
I did. Later on in the morning, I walked over to Capitol Hill Starbucks, and walking back, I was on the south side of Independence Avenue, and on the north side, there were a couple gentlemen wearing BLM T-shirts, or shirts rather, maybe not T-shirts, but BLM shirts, and they seemed activated and loud.
And were they kicking signs or anything along those lines?
Indeed, and they were chanting loudly and just seemed visibly agitated. And they were, by the time I saw them, we were approximately by the Jefferson Library of Congress, which is right across the street from the Capitol.
Yeah, well, we didn't hear much about that narrative. It was all just the Trump MAGA insurrectionists, not the BLMers or the Antifa-ers. We didn't see the FBI come out, lecture all of us about that potential for violence. And of course, that's because it was on the favored political side. They needed to use this setup to exploit one political party in America, and that was the right side. So we've got this other clip. This is from a Republican Party treasurer. His name is Thomas Bjorklund, and he went over there. He was hanging out. I think he was going to share with us a little bit about his reaction in the crowd. Here's what he said.
Okay. Can you describe what the crowd was like, or the people in the crowd?
Very friendly. It was diverse. There was actually a big line of people that said Asians for Trump, and they were really super nice. And we were talking to them, and everybody was just there having a good time. Listening to those speeches.
Okay. What was the temperature like outside?
It was freezing cold. It was windy, and that was very cold.
Okay. Can you give us a sense of maybe how big the crowd was there?
I'm guessing, if you looked at the whole crowd, maybe 350,000.
Let's look at Exhibit 1002, please.
So what happened with this guy is they played some videos from him. Now the judge is going to ask him some questions.
All these motorcycles pulled up, and I thought it was pretty cool, so I got my camera and started filming. They were on these Harleys, and then the horses came up, and I believe that was Park Police. And my brother was saying, "God bless you guys." And there was a woman there, and you could hear her in the background, and people were just kind of.
Mr. Rubin, would you mind disorienting for me?
Judge is asking some questions. Where were you specifically?
Where the speeches were happening? I know you said you could hear them on speakers, but how far were you from where the action was happening?
Yeah, the speeches were kind of boring, and so we decided to walk across the street from the Washington Monument, and we went over to, I think there's a World War II monument. There was a monument there, and we wanted to see that. And so we just walked over there to take a look, and that's where the Park Police were. So it was very close to where we were actually at. You can see the monument right there.
How far was the monument where you were on the original video from where the speeches were taking place?
It was probably 100 yards or a couple hundred yards, maybe a couple football.
So a few football fields?
Yeah, a couple.
Thank you. Sorry, I'm just not oriented.
I was planning on going there next, but I want to make sure, do you have a sense of comfort having a sense of where he was?
And was the crowd continuous from the monument to where the speeches were taking place?
Yeah, it was very packed. It was less so by the monument. I think most of the crowd wanted me closer to Donald Trump. And, I wanted to be more away from the crowd.
All right, so that was a lot of what we saw. Walking through exhibits, communicating about what the crowd was like, where they were. It was a lot of very, very peaceful people there. And they charged a bunch of people with not even violent crimes. And so a very small subset of people were even charged with violent crimes. And the question was, were those even valid charges? Of course, we disagree that they were. Now, I want to share with you, this is Ken Buck. Ken Buck came over from Colorado. He's a representative from the United States Congress currently. Will not be running again because he's kind of had enough of it. But this is what he said when he was testifying. And he walks us through the problems with the January 6th committee report. We know that the committee was basically illegal, as far as I could tell. Supposed to have a certain number of members. It didn't have the requisite number of Republicans. Supposed to have 5, only had 2. Supposed to be a total of, I think, 13 people, 8 and 5, and it wasn't. It was 9 and 7 and 2. And so it wasn't even lawful under its own orders in the House of Representatives, but Nancy Pelosi cobbled it together nonetheless. But this is now Ken Buck, who's explaining why the committee and the report was so bad.
Do you know if there were any members on the committee who subpoenaed or produced evidence for witnesses that were supportive or sympathetic to the proposition that January 6th was not an insurrection and was not caused by President Trump?
I'm aware that Leader McCarthy, when he made the statement that we would not be assigning Republicans to the January 6th committee after Speaker Pelosi had denied the assignments to Jim Gordon and Jim Banks. Leader McCarthy said that he was going to have a separate investigation, and that investigation would be our side of the story. And there were some witnesses who testified, and there were some documents produced, not through subpoena, but produced. And had those been part of the January 6th report, I think the report would have been more
I'm sorry, the report would have been more
complete.
Okay.
Complete. Meaning
is it fair to say it would have been more balanced?
I think if you're looking for balance, yes, I think it would have presented both sides.
Okay. Let me ask you about that separate committee real quick. Did that committee have any subpoena power?
It did not.
Did it have any ability to compel the production of documents?
It did not.
Or witnesses?
No.
Okay.
You're talking about the January 6th committee?
No, Your Honor. I'm talking about the separate report that Representative Buck referred to that Speaker McCarthy had created. Let me just clear up the record. Representative Buck.
Well, let me correct you. It's not Speaker McCarthy at the time.
I'm sorry. Yes, Leader. I just want to help clear up the record a little bit. So your testimony was that Minority Leader McCarthy had sort of established a separate committee, correct?
Well, I wouldn't call it a committee because there were no Democrats on his effort. This is well, I shouldn't say no Republicans. There were no Democrats on his effort. There were Jim Banks and a few others. Kelly Armstrong were on this other group that was formed to investigate.
Let me go back to the January 6th committee. You said there was no minority report produced by the January 6th committee. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And why is that important?
Because it provides the other side of the story. It provides a context for what one side is alleging. And it is important to have I believe, the full picture in a situation like the January 6th investigation.
Okay. You had said when you spoke with Representative Jordan that there were things that he said that were...
All right, we're going to fast forward through this, so let's hear from Ken.
With respect to the January 6th report, what's your view on it from a political standpoint in Congress?
I voted to certify the election. I thought what happened on January 6th was obviously bad. It was a riot in the Capitol building. It was meant to disturb a proceeding, and I felt that the parts of the report that I saw described those things. It went beyond that in other areas, and that's where I think the cross-examination in terms of the president's culpability would have been important.
Yeah, it would have been nice if we would have had a counter conversation during that, so we could have had an alternative narrative. You put both of them up together and you decide which one seems most believable. But they just gave us a book report for like 8 days.
And with the deficiency, why do you think it would have been important?
Because I think that in order to be able to judge someone's culpability, it's like going into a courtroom as a prosecutor and not having a defense counsel or defendant. I think in order to be able to judge someone's culpability, you've got to be able to hear both sides of the story. And in this case, there was not another side. There were people who voted to impeach the president because they made a judgment that he had involved in the January 6th events, and the other side was not present for one reason or another, was not present to be able to portray the other side of the story.
Yeah, for whatever reason or another, it's because they didn't want the other side to even have a say in the conversation. So Ken Buck surprisingly coming out and giving us some good points on that. Yeah, would have been nice if we had an adversarial proceeding. You know, we don't just have an adversarial proceeding with two sides just because it's like the default for some dumb reason, like we just did it that way. It makes sense to have both sides advocating for their side, and then the trier of fact, in this case, the American people, can decide for themselves and we can go vote on it. But that's not what's happening here. The January 6th Select Committee cut out one side, just like what they're trying to do in this courtroom, which is to cut out one party. Donald Trump, they do not want to be on the ballots in a state in the United States because they say he's an insurrectionist. We're on day 4 of this thing. We'll be back. There will be a lot more to cover. Thank you for subscribing. Thank you for inviting someone over to our channel and telling them to join us on our daily live streams. And we'll look forward to seeing you both on the next one.